everyone, I'm Cadet Captain James Mitchell Brown, the Superintendent for the 2016 Encampment. Today, we're going to be talking about intensity. We're going to be going over the purpose of intensity, coloring within the effective training box, and using our intensity toolbox. Feel free if you have any questions to talk with your First Sergeant or comment in the comment section down below. So what is intensity? Intensity is something that we use to raise the stress levels of the students so they can perform better. There are many different tools that we can use to raise intensity. One of them is sounding off, which I know you're very familiar with. Sounding off is just one of the tools that we can use though. And I'm going to give you a lot of different tools that we can use to raise that intensity level later on in this video. But for right now, we're going to go over some context. We're going to be going over some things that allow us to properly gauge the intensity level. This is the Yerkes-Dotson model. What this model shows is with more arousal or more stress, the performance goes up. But once there is a certain amount of arousal or stress that is reached, once you get in that optimal zone, all of a sudden the performance drastically cuts off. So essentially what we want to do is raise the stress level just enough, raise the intensity just enough that we're in the optimal performance area. Another way that we gauge our intensity is through the effective training box. This is the effective training box. Our mission while teaching our students is to stay within the box or color within inside the lines. What we're doing while we're coloring within the lines, inside the lines is we're doing everything that we can while still staying in the boundaries of how much this student can handle, what the student needs, and making sure that we're staying within regulations. Let me explain the box a little bit more. The left and the right side of the box is the regulations that we need to stay in. For example, you can't punch any cadets, so you can't do anything too crazy. You can't throw socks out the windows. You can't throw a bed out the window. There's just things that you can't do. And if you go outside of the box on this side, you're breaking the rules, and they're hard, fast rules that you cannot break. But then the top and the bottom are a little bit more ambiguous because it's essentially the top is what the student can handle. So that's basically, you don't want to keep on pushing to the point that on the Yerkes-Dotson curve, they're now terrified and they can't perform anymore because they're sitting in the corner crying. We do not want to go too high above that box. But then the bottom of the box is what the student needs. So, you can't just sit there the entire time and just fool around and do nothing. You need to at least give them some type of intensity so they can perform well. Next, we're going to be talking about your intensity toolbox. There are 4 tools that I'm going to give you right now that I want you to put into your toolbox so you can use at encampment to raise that intensity level. But you need to make sure that you're using the right tool for the right situation. For example, in real life, you can't use a wrench to paint a wall, so you need to make sure that we're using the right tool in this situation as well. And each one of these tools has a dial that you can use to turn up the tool and turn down the tool. So you can use the right amount of with the tool to properly train in a different type of situation. I suggest using the OODA loop to decide which tool to use in each situation, which OODA loop, of course, is observe, orient, decide, and act. And then you should act upon which tool is the correct tool to use in this situation. So let's take a little bit more of an in-depth look at each tool. Alright, here's our intensity toolbox. So in our toolbox we have 4 tools. Number 1 is presence. Presence is essentially how we present ourselves to our students. So it's taking notes, wearing your uniform properly, having the correct body language while we're next to our cadets. We use these tools to really set intensity while we're looking at them, and if we're looking correct, if we have that right presence, we have a good command presence, it sets intensity right at the bat because we're the example that they're looking at. Our next tool is essentially expectations. At the beginning of the day or beginning of any activity for that matter, you should be setting expectations. So at the beginning of a drill session, we should be, hey guys, we're going to power through this, we're going to be excellent on this drill, and we're going to do a great job. Just by setting those a couple of expectations of them, it completely raises that intensity level because they have to perform to those expectations. And if you change your expectations or you make them impossible expectations, it it's not an effective way to set expectations. Our next tool is volume. If we use, basically volume is something that we can use and we can be really loud or we can be really soft. That's where that dial comes in. We can turn up the volume and sound off very loud. Like during PT, it's a great time to sound off and be pumped for PT, but you don't want to be talking soft during that time. You should be saving talking soft for if you are teaching or something. You want to be like, hey, and then we're doing this and we're doing this. You want to really turn it down then, so you aren't yelling at them all the time. If you're yelling, you're going to lose your voice constantly. If you're sounding off too much, you're going to lose your voice. So volume is definitely one of those ones that we can turn up and we can turn down. I mean, by the way, sometimes if you are just whispering to them almost, it is way more intense than sounding off of them the entire time. Alright, our last tool we're going to be going over is time. You should be setting time limits to almost everything they do. If a cadet asks information, sir, permission to adjust, instantly you should say, alright, 10 seconds, go. Because that sets intensity. If they say, hey, we want to fill up our water bottles, you'll say, hey, alright, sounds good, you have 5 minutes, everybody needs to fill them up, go. Because that's just an easy way to really set intensity, because they're like, have a time limit and they have to move fast. But make sure you aren't setting impossible time limits or it completely diminishes your intensity by doing that. I mean, you can't really set it so they're going to be walking slow through it if you have some impossible time. Alright, I want to go over a couple examples of when you can use some of these tools. I have 2 examples for you. Number 1 is right before they're going to go into a class. That's a perfect time to hit them with a couple expectations you have of them. You know, usually sometimes right after lunch they're pretty tired, so if you sit in there and you say, alright, I expect everybody's going to be paying attention, everyone's going to be taking notes, and nobody's going to fall asleep. Alright, let's do this class. That sets some examples, or it sets some expectations you have of them right then. So it raises that intensity level because they need to reach those 3 things. So the entire time they're taking notes and they don't want to fall asleep because that's an expectation you have of them. So they won't fall asleep. And so they're sitting there like, alright, good. Another great time to be using some of these tools is when they're preparing for an inspection. 2 great tools to use during this time is your presence and time limits. So the entire time you should be telling them how much time they have left, because that raises the intensity level. So at 30-minute mark, you have 30 minutes until inspection starts. That raises the intensity because they're alright, they need to move fast to do that. And then presence, of course. Don't be sitting outside and just talking with the other flight sergeants and fooling around. You should be in the room and you should be in the room and helping them out almost. You should be right there answering any questions if they have any questions. You should be standing there and having the right posture about you, not just slumped in the corner. So, we went over the purpose of intensity, the effective training box, and some tools that you have in your intensity toolbox, and some examples on when to use them. Please answer the questions that your first sergeant has provided to you. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section down below. This is the Group Superintendent, signing off.